Welcome to Through the Fire with Angelina Paul, a space where every story matters, every voice is honored, and no journey is left untold. Let's journey together through the flames, uncovering the beauty of redemption, restoration, and the unbreakable human spirit. So welcome to Through the Fire with Angelina Paul. Today I have Jennie in the studio and I am so grateful that you're here today. One of the things that I always do in my episodes is I like to share with you just off the back what our time of preparation and that conversation, what it did to either ignite me or brought a revelation or started me on yet another path of healing. As you know, healing has layers and layers and layers. And one of the things out of your whole story, and we'll get to that later. So those who are tuning in, you do want to listen to the whole episode. When you talked about going to the hospital and asking for a mental health check, and you were finally able, after what happened, which we will share later, to get the mental health help, and you saw a psychiatrist for the first time. That was one of the things that stuck with me. And what came to me was ask for help.
Absolutely.
There is a lot of us who go through life and we think that people don't care about us. They do not want anything to do with us. There's nobody there for us. Yet it's because we don't ask for help. We always assume that people know what we need and when we need it and how it should be delivered to us. But unless you ask for help, some of the things you're struggling with, you might just remain in that space of feeling lonely and alone. So I wanted to share with you that off the back, that I am encouraged to be recording this with you because I know of the many other things that you will bring today. That's one of the things I will walk away with is ask for help. So Jennie, tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself to us. Who are you?
Thank you. Well, for starters, I am not typically someone who does ask for help. It's really, really hard for me to ask for help. I grew up, in a really, really low income house with a single mom. And I was just in survival mode my whole younger adult years. So asking for help, it was literally the last straw, rock bottom. The last thing in the world that I ever wanted to do was ask for help. And I'll be honest with you, today, it's still challenging for me to ask for help. It is. I feel like I can do it all. And so I will. And even if that means I don't get any sleep, I will do it. And I'm getting much, much better at doing that today. But a little bit about me. My journey was that of any cycle breaker. I noticed that I started to repeat the same cycles that happened in my family.
Right.
I grew up with a mom who just screamed all the time. She was not a safe space for me. She was an authoritative and someone that I was very afraid of. And my dad just wasn't around. I did have an incredible stepdad, and he's wonderful, but even he was afraid of my mother. So
okay. Yeah, because you did mention that growing up, you didn't feel safe and you ended up raising your siblings. Can you just, continue sharing with us how that experience shaped your view of life, motherhood?
Oh my goodness. Motherhood. I mean, I always felt like a burden growing up. I just felt like I was a burden. Like I was just, kids were supposed to be seen and not heard. And for some reason, of all my siblings, there's 4 of us, and I have a huge family full of lots of cousins. All the adults, they seem to be okay with me being around. And I think that really, really bothered my mother growing up. We've never talked about it, but I can see now, when we'd have big family gatherings, which was really often when I was a kid, it was a huge family, lots and lots of cousins. All the kids would be shooed out of the room, but I would come in, and I guess I kind of knew I was a healer then, because I would have my aunts and uncles and grandparents, they would pay me $2 to massage their shoulders for half an hour. Like we're talking in the 90s, $2 was a lot of money. Yeah, they were still bills. Yeah. They weren't coins. They were still bills. So, I think that really bothered my mother. So I kind of always grew up feeling like I'm a burden. I'm not, anyone that anybody wants to be around.
Wow. I want to talk a lot more about when you say your mom, it bothered your mom. What do you think that was? Because I have heard it before where instead of it being like a bond of mother-daughter, almost even sisterhood and coming up together and having this person that you look up to. I've heard often situations where some mothers may feel that they're in some sort of a competition with their children, which is really weird, even absurd, but it does happen. So if you were to put words to that, what would you say was really going on?
Well, I mean, maybe I reminded her of my father. You know, she was a single mom. I'm the middle of the first three. There's four of us. But when she was pregnant with my youngest brother is when her and my dad split up. So I've been told now that I know my dad, I didn't know him until I was an adult. But now that I know him now, I mean, I always thought I looked like my mom, but then I met him. I'm like, oh,
right.
I
so
kind of
you
look
think
like
that
you.
some of that was every time she looked at you, you reminded her of a time that was maybe possibly painful for her and traumatic for her. What was her experience with your father that you know of?
As far as I know, you know, they were together for a few years, but between, I think, something like 15 and 18. I mean, young. She was really young when she had me, and I have an older sister.
Yeah, you mentioned that by 21, she already had 3 children.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And from my understanding, the major cause of the breakup was that they didn't have a healthy relationship. It's very toxic. Right. I imagine there could have been some verbal, physical abuse, things like that going on.
Right.
But the story always was when I was younger that he wanted to go get a job to make more money. So he found one in the States. And essentially she said, if you are going to go to the States for this job, then you'll never see your kids again. And my mother is a woman of her word. So I didn't see my dad growing up.
So in spite of how that would impact you, because she made that vow and she is a vow keeper.
Oh, yes.
She ensured that you never saw your father. How old were you when you finally met him?
So I was 1 when they split up, and I did see him once a year until I was 6. But then she would rip up he'd send money and she'd rip up his checks. I don't need your money. We were on welfare. We were hungry. And she just refused to accept his money. And then when I was 18, my long-term boyfriend, who is now my husband.
And you guys have been together for 25 years, you
next
said?
month it'll be 25 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. His parents moved to the States when we were 18 and 19. So I reached out to my dad. I knew he had lived in America for a long time, and I thought maybe he could help me get citizenship or dual citizenship. And I found him. It was really challenging because he wasn't listed anywhere, but I used my detective skills and I found him. Record of him purchasing his home, and I sent him a letter, and it took him about 6 months before he responded to me. And then it took about another 6 months for us to actually meet.
Wow.
And by the time we did meet, I was pregnant with my son. Yeah. And the way that immigration works from Canadians going to America, you can sponsor your unwed child up to the age of 25 so long as they are not a parent. So because I was then pregnant with my son,
he wasn't able to do that for you.
No. And I think that's, blessing in disguise. I'm happy that we've stayed in Canada. We're from Ontario originally, and we made our way out here into BC. And this is definitely where I'm meant to be. So
right. Yeah, I feel the same way too about BC, specifically Kelowna. So 1 to 6 is the formative years of our lives. Yeah. And so you're seeing your father once a year. And then after those 6 years, you didn't see him again until you were 18 and you had to look for him.
That's right.
What do you remember about those first 6 years when you used to see him for that one time? What was that visit like for you?
It was very interesting. He did go and get a job, and a very well-paying job. And he ended up meeting my stepmom and marrying her, and they had my little brother. And it's funny because my mom and stepdad had my little sister the same year that my dad and stepmom had my little brother. So I've got siblings that are the same age. age.
Yeah.
And they were very well off. We were really struggling financially. And again, my mom wouldn't accept his money. She was too proud.
Yeah.
She was much too
proud. So when you were visiting with him in those first 6 years, do you remember seeing the difference of just accessibility to certain things, having certain things? Like what in particular did you get when you went to your dad's that wasn't there with mom?
Fruits and vegetables.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that. And since, I want to talk about it now, is you said even as you became a mother, and you would buy fruits and vegetables, you would allow your children to have it, but you wouldn't because you felt that you didn't deserve it. Does this go back to that time then that maybe you're at dad's and there's this, incredible diet, let's call it that, and, access to other things that you normally don't have at home, and then you're going home and it's not there. But it's not there because your dad is not supporting you. It's not there because your mom is sticking to her word. How do you process that now at this age, being a parent yourself, being a woman? Is there any empathy or understanding toward your mom? Or is there just, I'm angry that I had to go without because my mom was angry?
Well, this is my journey in a nutshell.
Yeah.
It is. I was so angry when I became a mother. I was so angry. The time that I became a mother was also the time that I was meeting my dad.
Yeah.
And I remember for my baby shower when I was pregnant with my son, one of my girlfriends, she wasn't thinking. She knew the story, but she wasn't thinking. And she called my mom and said, what does Jennie need for the baby shower? I know she doesn't need clothing because her dad just brought her all those Gerber clothing. My stepmom works for Gerber. So I got a whole bunch of, and my mom said, what did you just say? Her what? Her father brought her Gerber clothing? My mom didn't know I was talking to my dad. And she essentially disowned me while I was pregnant with my firstborn. I was 18 years old and it was devastating. I mean, she did come around, but those first few years that I was getting to know my dad were very rocky with my mother because she was so angry. She still to this day has not spoken to him in, 38 years.
Wow.
And is still so angry towards him. And at first, my journey to motherhood, I was angry. Yeah. I was so angry.
Who do you think you were angry at? Or do you know who you were angry at?
Both of them. I was angry at my father for what I felt was abandoning us. Yeah. I see now that he did try. He really did try, but he was up against a bull, like good luck.
And in some ways you became that bull.
I sure did at first. Yeah. And then I was of course angry at my mother because I had this baby and I was like, oh my God, how could she not nourish us?
Yeah.
How could she not provide us your child? Yes, provide a safe space. Like I was looking at this little baby boy and I was like, I would do anything for him. Yeah. And I did. Yeah. I did. I was 18 years old and I wasn't eating very good. I moved out when I was 17. I ate plain pasta and plain spaghetti sauce for dinner 5 days a week, but as soon as I became pregnant, I went and I sought help. I found a program that got me some fresh produce and I started eating better. And that was the first time in my whole life that I actually started to think about nourishment and what that meant. And, not just eating takeout all the time because it's cheaper, convenient. And when I first got pregnant, I worked at Taco Bell. So I had a lot of Taco Bell and I was like, oh, I should probably stop eating this. I'm building a baby now. And, really started to think about my health. And I was angry at the both of them,
So your mom, when you say she essentially disowned you once she found out that you're communicating with your father, was there a conversation with regards to that? Or was it passive aggressive? Was it just you could read between the lines? And if it was passive aggressive, what were some of the things you were experiencing that let you know that mom is not happy?
Oh, so passive aggressive. I mean, for starters, every single time that I tried to call, I would get hung up on. And you asked earlier
Did you know she was hanging up on you the first times, or did you think was something happening with the phone?
Well, at first I was like, did she just hang up on me? Did that just happen? Like that can't, that couldn't have just happened. I mean, she should be grateful that I got a gift for my unborn baby. Yeah. Right. And maybe, just maybe, I mean, she knew my whole life that I always wanted a connection with my father. Yeah. I was the only one of my siblings who was verbal about that. And she did not like that. Yeah. I remember we would get in fights when I was a preteen and I would say, I'm going to go live with my dad. And she'd be like, okay, pack your bag. Let's see how long it takes him to get here. And I'd pack my bag and I'd sit on the front step and I would stay out there for 10, 12 hours. And of course,
she would know, obviously, even if you were to come, there had to be communication with him.
And she's not communicating with him, so he's not
coming. So she'd make you sit out there and wait, knowing that it's not going to happen.
That's right. That's right.
And then at the end of you waiting with your bag and you're coming back in the house, what was said? At what time would you realize is not coming?
When I start to notice the lights in the house shutting off and people starting to go to bed.
Oh, so she'd turn off the lights. She'd be like, we're going to bed. You stay on that porch and wait for your daddy, who I know is not coming.
Yeah, and then I'd come in and there would be no words whatsoever.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now you've met your dad, you're calling. So first of all, the phone is she's hanging up on you.
Well,
and
I'm
then
pregnant,
what else?
right? Like I want to have a connection with my mom. I want to tell her about the pregnancy. I want to tell her about the appointments. My son was early as well. So I had some complications in the last 10 weeks of pregnancy. And, she worked at a doctor's office. So I was asking her for some advice. I would call her all the time. And 9 times out of 10, when she first found out that I was talking to my dad, the conversation would end up there and I would get hung up on.
Wow.
Yeah, that's I see now.
And then so how did it, so there was never a conversation, it was just hanging up on you. Did you try to visit her?
Yes, I lived about half an hour away. So I lived in the next town over. So I did. I went to go visit her and I wanted to have my baby in my hometown, which was half an hour away where she lived. So I was going to the doctor there. Every time I went to the doctor, I would go and talk to her. And I was basically tiptoeing when I saw her in person. I just made sure to not talk about my father when I was around her. And when it was on the phone, it felt a little more safe because there was distance between us.
Yeah, she couldn't lunge at you or anything. Yeah. But when you were in person, so you would just basically edit how you're speaking with her to make sure that you're not bringing in anything about your dad. And how are these conversations like? Like, is she saying anything about your pregnancy, the baby, that whole expectation thing of mom and daughter where it's like, when the baby gets here, what's going on with the crib? What's the room looking like? What would you need? Is that happening at all or no?
No. And, I hadn't thought of it until right this moment. But, I think at that point, my mom was 38. She was young, because she was young when she had me and I was young when I had my son. I do remember she was considering another child at that age. Yeah. So I think once again, there was that little bit of envy, like, oh, she's having a baby. When I first told her I was pregnant, I was 18 years old. I thought she would be so angry. Yeah. And she wasn't. She was like, oh, yes. Oh my goodness, yay. She was happy. I mean, my in-laws, they were like, oh my God. Oh no. They're
because it's like you're 18, which would be the normal reaction.
Totally.
So your mom at the time was also wanting to have a child. And so do you think though, like in your own observation and your experience of your mom, just in this part we're talking about, would saying your mom was jealous of you in some way, will that be a fair statement, or what do you think?
Well, I think I have a bit of a unique perspective. I do think she was jealous, or maybe is jealous still. I'm not sure. But my journey has led me down quite an interesting path where I now do a lot of shamanic healing. And when I do readings with my clients, I do a lot of past life work. So of course I've had to do past life work on myself.
For yourself. Yeah.
I needed to know. And I believe that we have some past life karma. Yeah. And that is playing a role in this. It's playing a big role in this. I have other siblings as well. And we all have an interesting relationship with my mother in our own individual ways. Yeah. And I am the only one that speaks to our father, the only one. My other 2 siblings want absolutely nothing to do with him. Yeah. But I believe that's because we were alienated from him. We were taught like, oh, he abandoned you. He cares more about his son than he does about you 3. Right. And I mean, I did see that. My little brother got a brand new motorcycle for a high school graduation gift. And I'm like eating the same peanut butter sandwich I've had for the last 15 years in a row.
Wow. Yeah. That's very confronting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I have relationships with them now, with my brother and my dad and my stepmom. Is it what I want it to be? No, it's still very distant. I think he just went, 30 years without having a relationship with me. So it's challenging for him to have a relationship with me now. We'll talk on Christmas and birthdays, but that's unfortunate. unfortunately.
That's about it. Yeah, it is that relationship or that whole experience. It's actually one of the reasons why I'm doing the podcast. So my oldest daughter, Paida, who passed away, it was the same situation. We talked about it just briefly before we got on the podcast, but it was the same situation where, I end up pregnant, and this is all in my book. I end up pregnant, and, this man is a married man, and there's a lot of stuff that came with that. People call you different names, home wrecker, you're a whore, you're a bitch, you're whatever, nasty stuff a woman could be that is pregnant. And it all made it worse because he would say, this is not my child. All sorts of things that were coming up. He was a much, much older man than I, old enough to be my father at the time. And so I remember that when I had my daughter, I left my daughter at home, went to university. And then when I came to Canada, I finally got to bring my daughter here. And I remember that my daughter would ask me about her dad, like, Mom, can I meet my father? And my first thing, like, I was never really angry with this guy. I think the way that it worked out for me is I just rationalize, like, okay, I'm a woman who had a pregnant with a married man. That's bad. So why should I expect anything? So I never really expected anything. My family was livid, and they wanted this man to do whatever that he had to do. But for me, I never felt like I had the right to demand anything. I felt like I'd made a very big mistake. I just need to disappear. And it made sense for me in my head, so I didn't expect anything. But when my daughter would ask about her dad, this was always how I would open the conversation. So I would say, oh, your dad, I hope his balls fall off. Anyway, I don't mind you meeting your father. I started saying it like a joke, but I can see how it was affecting her. Like a friend of mine just recently were talking about my daughter and said, Paida always spoke about how she really wanted to meet her father. So I guess in some ways, even if there's some animated way in my story, I understand a mother who has had an experience with a man that has rejected them. And I understand the vow of saying, I never ever want anything to do with it. I even understand not connecting the dots of saying my rejection of this man, where I'm saying I'm giving you a piece of your own medicine, is also means that my children are now blocked from having an experience with this person, but it's not their fault. They need to. So the things don't really connect as well because you're emotional, you're hurt. So I want to hear about, and of course, my daughter passed away without ever really meeting her father. And I think when I say this is part of the reason why I'm doing this is I feel that in many ways I wasn't able to have a point where I truly shared my story with my daughter of a woman who's pregnant at 20 and this man who is almost double her age rejecting her, what that felt like. And I feel like that communication might have helped bring, a lot more revelation to some of the statements that I'd made to her. And then with her, I grew up with both my parents in my home till my father passed away and then my mom passed away. I don't know what it's like for a child who is born and the mom leaves to go to another country for school and then you stay with your grandmother until you're 13. Everyone around you is saying, Mommy, Daddy, and you can't say that. I never asked her what that story was all about. And then I have my mom where my dad passes away in their matrimonial bedroom and she has to watch the police take the body and go and take him to the hospital. Back then in Africa, they used to bring this metal coffin. And I remember my mom screaming that my dad's going to be cold in there, but he was already dead. I never sat with her to hear the story of the woman who's the widow. I never saw her as that. She was always my mom. She had to show up for me when I wanted. I didn't care that, in many ways, my conduct was almost as if I didn't care that your husband has passed away. It's my dad. I'm grieving. Make me feel better and be about me. So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the podcast is I think that many times we think we understand the story because, oh yeah, we know what it's like when women are dumped by a guy. Oh, we know what it's like, and I know know it because I watched it on TV. I watched this program. But when it's stories within your family, it's important to have the conversation. So having said that, I want to know, what does the compassion you have for your mom now that you're a mother and you're a wife, what does the compassion you have for your mother sound like? What is the situation there?
Well, I will say, before I could have compassion for my mother, my children are 4.5 years apart. So when I had my second child, as a little girl, my anger was reignited. I was like, wait a second. How could they? I was so angry at the both of them. And by then I had started to get to know my dad a little bit. So it was reignited, because I was like, wait a second, it's one thing when I have this baby boy and this child, and how could they? But then I had a baby girl, and I was like...
so your first was a boy.
My first was a boy.
So that was okay. No anger there.
Oh, I was angry. I was angry, all right.
Okay.
But I thought I had found forgiveness and compassion,
toward your mom and the whole situation.
I was working really hard on it. But then when my daughter was born, it was just reignited.
Yeah.
It was reignited. I was so angry at first. And you and I had talked about this before. I kind of hit what I call my rock bottom. My mental health was really struggling. I had gone on I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. I had gone on antidepressants when my son was 9 months old.
Okay.
And I had continued on those all through the pregnancy. I asked about going off them. The doctor didn't think it was a good idea. So I continued on them through my second pregnancy.
Okay.
My husband had just started working away. We were working opposite shifts, and, I was juggling. I was in survival mode. So sometimes I would work 3 jobs at a time.
Wow.
Because I didn't want my children to grow up poor like I did.
Yeah.
And my husband, he didn't grow up like that. His family was so proud. They were just like, if you need help, we'll help you, and make sure that you've got everything you need for that baby. That baby can't go without, and it was a different perspective I had never had before.
Right.
And again, I started to really, really think about my overall health, because now I'm not only, caring for myself when I was pregnant, but also these babies. And I was nursing my daughter until she was 2. So I was really conscious about what I was eating that entire time. And then shortly after her second birthday, my mental health was really, really struggling. And I went to a psychic, and she was like, okay, I can tell you're struggling. Number one, you're a healer. You're not going through this for nothing. Yeah. It's going to help you. What you heal from, you'll be able to help others heal from. And I was like, what is this lady talking about? And she's like, maybe you should consider, going to CMHC, see if they can give you some mental health advice, something more than just a medication. I don't, obviously the medication's not working if you're feeling like this, even while you're taking it. And I was pretty heavy at that time. I was overweight by about 35 pounds, and I was giving myself a really hard time about that. I was like, I can't blame the baby anymore when she's 2. Yeah. And the longer time went on, I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's so funny that you actually say it that way. Blame the baby.
Yeah. That was my mindset.
Blame the baby.
That was my mindset.
So your husband is working in Alberta. You're in Ontario. You're working 3 jobs, because in spite of the supportive family that you've married into, your mindset is still, I grew up poor and we're not going to be poor, and I'm going to do everything I can to not be poor. Oh yeah. So you're working 3 jobs, and most of the time you're by yourself because your husband is remotely working in Alberta. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it was a lot. And that first, that meeting with the psychic really changed everything for me. Why a psychic?
I had my mom was a little bit spiritual growing up. She didn't really share any of that with me until right before I moved out. I moved out when I was 17. And those couple years right before I moved out, she started going to some spiritual meet up once a week or something. And I was so intrigued. Right. I was so intrigued. When I was younger, I used to have experiences, and I thought I could talk to the trees and the birds.
Tell me a little bit more about those experiences. Well, I mean, how did it start?
Well, we would, my stepdad was always working. He worked morning till night. After his 9 to 5, he'd go work in the evening. And after the evening, he'd work all weekend. So he'd take us out to this shop. He was a mechanic. He'd take us out to this shop at this farm, and we'd have to go fend for ourselves and keep ourselves busy for hours while he was working. Yeah. So I'd go out into these fields, and I'd be like, talking to the birds and talking to the trees. And
how old were you then?
Young. And
5, did the trees talk
6?
back?
Yeah.
What did they say? Like, what were the conversations like?
Like, just relax. Just, you're fine. You're safe. This is warm. This is, I remember sitting under willow trees, and the willow tree branches would be moving around, and I would always want to go to the willow trees. And I didn't know until just the last several years that the willow tree is a grandmother spirit. And I just remember feeling so safe under that willow tree. And, I'd be afraid of getting in trouble for anything, like everyone was always in trouble. So as soon as we got to that farm, I'd hightail it to the willow tree and
that was your safe space.
Going to lay under the willow tree.
I asked you why the psychic, because I know you shared a little bit of a story, because I always want to understand what leads people to a certain spiritual guide or help. So you mentioned that when you were younger, your parents on Sundays, most parents in the community that you grew up in will be hungover, and there used to be a bus that would come and pick up the kids to take them to Sunday school.
That's right.
So at some point you had that experience in the Christian faith, and you were going and you were being taught the Bible there, and then you have your mom who's kind of spiritual and you're intrigued, and then you're going through this journey by yourself where you're speaking to the trees and you're in nature, and you feel like there's this communication, this exchange that's going on. So with all these spiritual experiences, the one that resonated with you more was the psychic. Was this a referral? Was this just a sign on the road when you're walking that said psychic? How did you pick this particular psychic?
Back then it was the days of, what was it called? Kijiji? Kijiji.
Oh, Kijiji is still there, girl.
Oh, is it there? I don't know anymore.
It's just been taken, overridden by other things. Like, Kijiji's still there.
Yeah, and I had sent her a message, and I never followed through because I really struggled spending money on myself in those days.
So did you go on Kijiji specifically looking for a psychic?
I did, and I sent her a message, and she responded back, and I ignored it. But then it was my birthday. It was my birthday, and my husband was away at work, and I was overwhelmed with work, and I had worked 2 jobs that day, and I had not gotten a single phone call from any of my siblings or parents, and I was devastated. And that wasn't the first birthday that had happened. Wow. I mean, that was a pretty regular occurrence, and still to this day. Unfortunately, I don't just pick up the phone and call my siblings. If I do, they might not answer. They probably won't answer.
Was it, even when you were growing up, there wasn't celebrating of birthdays? Or was it something that as you grew up and you were now really trying to find your own expression after what you'd gone through in your home growing up, you stopped communicating? Like, when did the breakdown of communication happen where you don't even call each other to say happy birthday?
I think it's because I left home so early.
Okay.
I was only 17 when I left, and my older sister was still at home. My younger siblings were still kind of kids at the time, right? So for me to leave, because, the kids aren't going to call me, and I'm just trying to survive, so I'm not going to call them. So by the time we got to the point where we were all adults, it had already become what it is. And it just never, it's so unfortunate. My older sister and I, we have children who are very close in age, and, we could have shared those experiences and we didn't. And then my husband's family, I feel like they're my family too, because we've been together since we were 14 and 15, and his sisters didn't have children until just recently. So they were never there for any support. And
because they didn't probably understand it, or maybe not as committed or engaged to that. But you desired your family to at least call you. So this day is your birthday. You call the psychic. The psychic says to you, you are a healer.
I'm like,
what
I need to see you today.
Is not going to be futile. You are going to be able to use these experiences once you find your own healing to be able to heal or help others in their healing journey.
And another thing she said was, you will not be able to move forward until you can find forgiveness for both of your parents.
Right.
And
so is this where we get to your compassion for your mom?
That changed
So did you automatically on that day start walking the journey of forgive? Did you take it seriously, or did you feel like, oh Lord, on top of everything I'm going through and what nobody's even calling to acknowledge even a day to celebrate me. Now you want me to forgive them? Like, how did that come to you? Did it just fall in where you were like, yeah, she's right, I need to let some things go?
It took a moment. I mean, we met at a Starbucks inside of a Chapters. Yeah. So I was already at the bookstore. And while we had our reading, she wrote everything down for me. So when she left, I had the babysitter for the night. My neighbor was an older single woman. So I'm like, the kids are already in bed. Can you just watch them? I'll be back in a few hours. So we had our 1 hour reading, and then I had a little bit more time. So I read it over again, and I let it, I really sat with it and let it resonate with me. And one thing she said, and this is Spirituality 101. I know people are listening. They're going to laugh. She goes, maybe you should get the book, The Secret.
Oh.
So I did.
Okay.
I went and I'm like, it's my birthday. I'm getting myself a present. Yeah. So I got the Secret.
Book. I actually met Lisa Nichols, who's one of the authors in that book. I traveled to San Diego at one time. I was also on my spiritual quest. I knew that, I had the gift of oration and I'm supposed to do something with it. And at the time, Lisa's message truly resonated with me. So I went and I met her, and actually got to talk to her because when she does these events in the evening, she does like a party because it's around her birthday. Oh, cool. And so I actually got to meet her in person and took a picture, and I had read The Secret. So what did you find in The Secret?
Well, that started a morning ritual for me. This psychic had also given me a 40-day forgiveness prayer to say every day for 40 days. So I began starting my morning with a morning ritual where I'd wake up half an hour before the kids. I'd make myself my coffee. I'd drink it in the dark, silent and darkness. And I would just go over a list of absolutely everything that I was grateful for from the day before.
Right.
And then I would say my 40-day forgiveness prayer for my mother and my father.
Right.
Now, I'll be honest, in order for it to really work.
Where did you get the forgiveness prayer from? Is it a prayer that you wrote?
Me. She wrote it for me.
Oh, she wrote it down, and so it was words that you would say as a prayer to help you. Right. So, unlike other people, you didn't think that it's about picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, Mom, I forgive you. Dad, I forgive you." You sort of started working.
No, just on myself.
Not sort of. You started working from within.
That's right.
So you're in a dark room. You're going through all the meditation for yourself, and then in the end, you'd read the prayer of forgiveness for your dad and toward your dad and toward your mom.
That's right. And this psychic had also...
Do you remember what the prayer said?
I do, because I still use it all the time.
So let's hear it.
So it's super simple. You say their name. So I'll use myself as an example. So Jennie Henderson, I forgive you. Jennie Henderson, I release you. Jennie Henderson, I let you go. Jennie Henderson, please forgive me. Jennie Henderson, please release me. Jennie Henderson, please let me go. And you say it every day for 40 days. And if you miss a day, you start again. And I had to start again and again and again and again and again, because every once in a while...
But your mom's name is not Jennie.
No, I would use her name.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I just use my name for example.
Okay. I got confused there for a moment. I'm like, what is it? So you say the name of the person and you say, That's right.
So I forgive you. I release you. I let you go. Please forgive me. Please release me. Please let me go. It's so simple. But then in those days, I would occasionally reach out to my mom or dad because I was like waiting and hoping that they would call, and they wouldn't. Right. And then I'd reach out to them, and then it would always, with my mom, it was always like,
should hit the rewind button.
Yeah,
and
every
then
single
go
time.
Back where you were.
And then I'd miss a couple days of the forgiveness prayer and have to start again.
Okay, so when you missed the days, was it intentional? Did you just happen to forget?
No, I think it was resistance.
Were you like, no, I don't want to release you. I don't want you to let me go.
My ego was like, we don't need to forgive her.
Yeah. So the ego
she doesn't deserve our forgiveness.
So when you're doing this, and in the moments that you felt it was working, what were the emotions that were coming up? Are you crying? Are you really feeling like you're connecting with her spiritually at some level where really forgiveness is beginning to happen?
Yeah, and I started to have some conversations with my grandma. My grandma and I were really close, my mom's mom. I didn't see her all that often because she lived in a different town a few hours away, but we were always very close. She was the only one who would tell me stories about my father. So I just craved time with her. And I just loved my grandpa so much. She was so sweet and just so loving. And my grandmother, she came from a very abusive line of men.
Right.
So my grandpa was kind of like, the knight in shining armor, like the first man to not abuse his daughters. And, I felt really safe with them. And I would talk to my grandma, and she would tell me stories about, it was really tough. It was really tough. And I started to have a different perspective of my mother's own childhood.
Right.
And, I do remember, like, my grandparents are sweet, but they're like, go pick your licking. Like, what do you want to be hit by? Do you want the spatula? You want the belt? What do you want?
Okay. So your mom was also at the receiving end of that.
Totally.
We grew up and our parents would hit us or whatever, and it was normal. So your mom came, and now obviously there's abuse and a whole law and a whole precedent, and
that's right.
You could just be under the prison.
Yes.
But we grew up with that. But your mom was on the receiving end of what we now know with all the studies that have been done, how it impacts the development of a child, and that it's just not really the right way to teach your children. But your mom grew up on that. So now you're realizing with the stories from your grandmother that your mom was on the receiving end of this.
That's right.
And so that helped, along with your prayers, to begin to form empathy toward your mother.
That's right. And I also started, as I continued my spiritual journey, just as you said, I started to really get a good understanding that we inherit trauma. And as I was learning stories about my mother, and still to this day, she will not admit to some of the abuse that we had to endure. I've tried to talk to her about it. She's like, that didn't happen. Yes, it did. And I have aunts and uncles who confirm it. But I realize I don't really need that from her. I don't need her validation. I know what happened. She knows what happened at soul level, even if we're not willing to admit it.
Yeah.
And then I started to hear, as my spiritual journey continued, a lot of my extended family members, and I have a huge family. My great grandma had 15 children.
Right.
Some of them started to come to me and tell me about even worse abuse that happened in my grandmother's generation.
Right.
And I realized, like, this is inherited, and my mom is just repeating a pattern, and I have a choice here. I can continue to repeat this cycle, or I can make a change. And I had already been making changes since my daughter was 2.5. She's 15 now. So, it's been an ongoing. And as you said at the very beginning, our healing comes in layers. I think I'll probably be healing for the rest of my life, because once I heal one thing, and I'm going to have the ability to cope with something else that I haven't yet healed.
Yeah. It is definitely a journey. So I want to kind of go back to where you are overwhelmed and all this is happening. Your husband is away. You hit your rock bottom. You finally go and ask for help. And they ask you if you're thinking of harming yourself.
They did.
You say yes, because this is the only way that they're going to at least give you the help that you need. Yeah. I was saying to you yesterday that when you said, after you said your, yes, you might, do something to yourself, they put you in a padded room. What was that experience like for you?
Well, when I met the psychic, she had suggested I work with a personal trainer, and I try to seek mental health advice. So I started working with a personal trainer, and I would feel good after a workout.
Yeah.
And it was the first time in my life I was consistent with working out. So like it felt good. But then I'd go to bed, and the next morning I would wake up with anxiety up to my eyeballs. And there was always someone crying when we left the house. My son, my daughter, myself, one of us, at least one of us.
Yeah.
And one day it was a particularly rough morning.
Yeah.
And I dropped them off at school and daycare, and I went to work, and I got to the parking lot at work, and I worked at a call center at the time. And I was like, I cannot go into this place.
Yeah.
And I turned around and I left. I went to the hospital, and I was like, I need some help. I've been to CMHC. I'm on wait lists. I've been to my doctor. I'm on wait lists. Everyone's just giving me pills, but the pills are clearly not working because I am so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And they were like, well,
because you'd stayed on the antidepressants and all this stuff, even from the time that you had struggled with the postpartum depression.
That's right. For years and years. And they weren't, I felt like things were just I couldn't cope. They were just too much. Everything just felt like it was too much. There wasn't enough hours in the day. There's certainly not enough support. No support at that time. Support was non-existent. My husband worked 21 straight nights with 7 days off. And then day 1 and day 7, he was traveling. So I had him for 5 days a month.
So you really didn't have the support that you needed.
That's right. It takes a village, and there was no village. I had no village at all. So I went in, and they said, well, have you considered harming yourself? And I said, of course I've considered it, but I have 2 children
so
who
I'm not
need their mother.
Do it, but
they're not going to do it.
As many of us have, right? We've all considered it, and some of us might not know to do what you did because we think, like I know for me, just from even a cultural perspective, I wouldn't even admit to that because to me that's like I'm crazy, I'm losing my mind. I don't want to be called crazy, so I'm not going to do that. But you said that, but you did have a reason behind it, and they took you in, they put you in this padded
room with a police officer with a gun outside the door. I as soon as they closed that door and I heard it lock, I just thought, oh my God, what have I done? I made a mistake. Oh no.
Were you not scared that they're going to go take your kids?
That's exactly what I thought.
They're going to go to social services.
Yes.
Is that what happened, or did they just like, how long were you there?
No, I was there. I had to wait for a doctor. It took a few hours for the doctor to come, and thankfully I'd called my husband right as I was walking in. I said, you need to pick the kids up this afternoon. I don't care what it takes. If you have to leave work, you have to pick the kids up because I will not be there to pick them up. Wow. And he was like, okay. And I had a little bit of experience with, in Ontario, it's a Children's Aid Society, just because my sister has had experience with them and my aunt had experience with them. So I was like, oh God, I have nothing to worry about. Like, my house is clean. There's food in the fridge.
Yeah, they're not going to take my children away. And as long as my husband shows up on time, then I'll be fine.
That's right. But when the doctor finally came to see me, we only talked for about an hour, and he was like, I just think you need some support. I think that's all that is needed here. There's nothing wrong with you. It doesn't sound to me like you're going to hurt yourself. I would like to set you up with a mental health specialist. And he made me, that was on like a Thursday or Friday, and he made me the appointment on the Monday morning. And after that, I saw a psychiatrist once a week for the next 5 years of my life. Right. And I went off of the antidepressants. The psychiatrist didn't recommend it. I did. I was like, they're obviously not helping, so I'm just going to go off of them.
Right. And then that was it. And you started this journey of healing. And it's fascinating to me because you talk about, at that time, you realized that this psychic had basically given you a blueprint of how to take care of your mind, your body, and your spirit. And you were, maybe in some ways unintentionally following it, and it was turning out to be working out for you. So I want to fast forward to you're going through this experience. One of the things the psychic had told you is to go west.
Yes.
And so your husband was already west, right, working. And so you're here, and you've started this path of healing. And through your weight loss journey, after you lost weight, you became a coach for people that were wanting to lose weight as well. You helped over 1,000 people in like a span of 7 years doing this. And so I want to talk about, so you're doing this sounds really, really good. You're in a good place as far as your body and your mental health. But something else, you start to discover something else about yourself. Before we talk about that, I just want to talk about this because I'm fascinated by it. As you are doing this, you are doing manifestation. You've bought the house of your dreams. You're financially fit, and you even got fake boobs.
I did.
Talk about fake boobs. And you thought this was good. I got my boobs, I got my money, I got my car, I got my man. It's working out. You've gone through this forgiveness journey. You said the prayers. You found compassion toward your mom. You've realized that you don't need them to acknowledge anything that has been done to you. But even with that, you can still walk this path of forgiveness and healing. And so you said it this way. You said, and then I tore it all apart.
I brought it to the ground.
You brought it all to the ground.
That's right.
Why?
Well, you're right. I did go through my fat loss journey. I did bodybuilding, so I was left with some empty tea bags, and I decided I was going to fill them up with some silicone. I thought that would make me love my body, because I realized even after I lost 35 pounds and I was bodybuilding, I still didn't love my body.
And tea bags, people, means the boobs started sagging with the weight loss. No, I'm just being crazy.
Yeah, they sure did. They sure did.
Weight loss is not that easy. There's always the loose skin,
There
right?
is loose skin. Exactly. And I reached all my financial goals, which was really hard for me. I had to work through a lot of money mindset issues. I worked with different coaches. I worked with different healers. I worked on some past life stuff around money. I worked on, because I grew up really poor.
Yeah. So your money mindset wasn't where it needed to be successful.
No, I struggled my first 5 years in business. I started my business because I had my own fat loss journey, and people were seeing it on social media, and they were coming to me and asking me for help. And it just started organically. never thought I would do that, but it just started organically. And I was teaching people the mindset stuff that I was learning in therapy, and that was really helping them. And I was teaching them the spiritual practices that I was doing, and that was really helping them. And I exceeded my financial goals. And I thought, I'll get these boobs and they'll make me feel better because I have the money. Why not? They did not make me feel better.
Yeah.
And my business became something that I was starting to resent because
you were working 40 hours.
Gosh, no, I was working 80 to 90 hours a week. Oh, it was insane.
So it was a different type of overwhelm, right?
It was a different type.
From the overwhelm of parenting on your own for most of the time, overworking because that you don't want to go back to where you're poor again.
That's right.
And then you found this path which is supposed to be refreshing, but because of, mindset, you're still overworking yourself even in that space.
It's those beliefs and that rejection of my parents really caused a huge worthiness wound for me.
Yeah.
I started to believe that my only worth was in what I was able to produce, what I was able to achieve.
Right.
And I see this a lot. There's a lot of high achieving women out there who they're really struggling with their worthiness. And I got the boobs out because I was like, oh my God, I don't want these in my body. Why did I even get them in the first place? I can't stand when people look at me. So you realized
you were still not feeling good about yourself.
Yes. And I also realized that the only clients that I was working with that were actually seeing the results long term, like they would lose, 20 to 30 inches in 12 weeks with me. That was my promise, and everybody achieved that. And they did it eating foods that they loved. I used to always say, come on over to the dark side. We eat cookies over here.
Yeah. We eat cookies and maintain our weight or lose weight.
Yes, exactly. And it was working. But most of them would gain the weight back. The only ones who didn't gain the weight back were the ones that were on their healing journey.
Right.
So I decided, okay, I've been doing this healing journey for like 8, 9, 10 years now. I think it's time to go a little bit deeper because obviously this is not...
There's still something wrong because I'm not happy.
That's right. And I had hired a shaman in my fat loss program to come in once a month to teach us different healing modalities and to take us on these shamanic journeys. And I was working with her one-on-one, and we were getting somewhere. I mean, I wanted the boobs out. Obviously, I was getting somewhere. Yeah. So I did. And then,
of course you were. If you took out the boobs, how much were the boobs?
Oh God. I had so many complications. My body was like, these are not for you. And I had complication after complication after complication. I had 5 surgeries in 5 years, a grand total of $38,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this was when you were fighting the fight, the good fight of keeping the boobs.
Right.
And
I really wanted to keep them. And then I was like, why am I going through this? My body is obviously telling me that they don't. At the time, I believed so strongly in manifestation. I was like, breast implant illness isn't real. If I believe in it, then it's going to happen to me. And because I refused to believe in it, my body was like, well, we're gonna screw up your muscles.
Show you that this is real.
We're gonna give you different complications. You might not feel sick. You might not be having physical symptoms, but we're gonna, like, my muscles were all hacked up, and I had pain and a lymph node. And
how much bigger had you gone in size?
Well, quite a bit bigger.
Was it like from an A cup to like a triple double D?
I was like a 30A because again, I had nothing. My body fat was nothing. I had a full 6-pack at the time, so I was like, I had no boobs left. But I had a lot of empty skin. So I was like a 30A. And then my husband called them 30 huge because I was a 30H.
Oh my God.
Like you can't even find bras like that.
Like even if you didn't have the surgery, that would have still been too much pressure on your back.
Oh my gosh. I still to this day, I've had them out for a year now. I still to this day have nerve pain in my neck, and I go to massage and physio, and I do a lot of shamanic healing and energy healing on it. That's another thing. I mean, as soon as they came out, I had some lumps in my breast, and I went for ultrasounds, and they were suspicious.
Wow.
And I went to a shamanic retreat last year because now I've been training in shamanism now for a couple of years. That's where my path led me to. And I went to this retreat with my teachers, and I said, could I possibly get a healing while I'm here? I'm a little concerned. I have these suspicious lumps and they want to do a biopsy. They consider it precancerous, and I'm young and I'm scared. And I received a shamanic healing, and I went for the biopsy, and the doctor was like, this is odd. I can't do a biopsy today. There's nothing here for me to biopsy.
Nothing there.
There's nothing there.
Wow. That's amazing. That's a miracle. You know what is coming to me more from a spiritual perspective. I know when I ask the question, for me, I always like to use Yuma. It's by no means, diminishing the experiences we've had, but Yuma has been my friend for many, many years, and I do like to carry her along. But what came to me is that from A to like H, it almost, from a spiritual perspective, it shows the huge gap that was still there in terms of your healing spiritually.
Oh, yeah.
That's like, if you're to give a size to measure it was like you still had this whole big blot that you were trying to fill in.
That's right.
That needed healing.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about shamanism, but you and I talked a bit about me being African when I grew up. There's a lot of traditional African ways of healing, especially with herbs.
Yes.
And I come from a family that there are many herbalists in my family. And my grandmother always told me that it is a gift that we have in the family. And you and I talked about, the fight between our indigenous ways of healing. Many indigenous people across the world struggle with that when they encounter Christianity and in religious circles, because there is a tendency to want to demonize these types of the ways that certain communities and cultures are. It's normally, dismissed as witchcraft or voodoo.
That's right.
But I know for a fact that I had intense period pains to an extent where, even medical professionals will tell me that I might not even have children. But my grandmother just, had a dream and went and plucked this herb and I was healed. So, I tend to think that shamanism has maybe, some relation to healing with herbs and nature, and that, God has given us many things, especially in plants, that are for healing. And I know that when these things are demonized, they'll then turn around and say, oh, there's a naturopath. They're doing it. There's a holistic healer. So when there's a nice name to it, it's good. But if it's an African who brings a bush and says, there you go, Jennie, take this and you get healed. And it's like, oh, she's a voodoo priestess. You know what I mean? So I appreciate your ability to do this as a form of healing, and even just your dedication in exploring and learning and being curious about it. So tell me about, so we've talked about this journey that is so many things, in talking to you, I realized there's so many topics. The only thing I keep thinking about is outside of this podcast, we need to do more.
Oh, yes,
because
please.
It's not possible to talk about everything. You touched on forgiveness I wanted to explore that. I wanted to explore the mother-daughter relationship, so many things, just generational things that we need to fight, and how can we fight them, and what's the best way, using different healing methods. But I know the podcast is just an hour. So I hope that outside of it we'll do more. But I want you to just share with people what you're doing now in this community of Kelowna. And I want you to tell us what it is that you hope your story will do when it goes out there. And what's your message? What's your advice to those that have been listening today that have a similar path with yours?
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And I love that you've shared your experience, because I've heard a lot about African shamanism in my training. And I was like, oh my goodness, you just validated everything I learned.
Maybe I'll do a tour to Africa and introduce you to my family, and maybe give myself permission beyond religion to know that these ways are not demonic.
That's right.
They're not, it's not voodoo. It's not black magic. We are using a plant to heal.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, when I burned it to the ground 3 years ago, I stepped away from fat loss, and I started doing spiritual alignment coaching and spiritual business mentorship, and teaching women how to create their own online businesses just like I had. And I began training in shamanism, which is really about going so much deeper on your own journey. The first, the path that I have chosen, there's many paths that people can choose if they would like to train in shamanism. But the path that I chose, the first year and a half is just inner work.
Okay.
It's just inner work and coming into right relationship with different spirit allies and archetypes and, nature spirits and things like that. And then the second year is more techniques of different types of healing that we can do as a shaman. And during those 3 years, I realized that, I am meant to help people who are uncomfortable in their skin.
Right.
I didn't have my own fat loss journey. I didn't work with 1,000 women and help them love their body for nothing.
Right.
I am supposed to still help people love their body, even though I'm also doing readings and hosting retreats and, working as a spiritual mentor. So just recently I've blended those two worlds together.
Wow.
And I've been working with women in a program that I call Nourish Your Temple.
Right.
And it is definitely still a program to help you learn to love your body and how to treat your body well. But the main premise is that we really identify what is the core of your worthiness wound. Right. Because we all have one. And I wasn't treating myself very well because I didn't believe I was worthy because my father left and my mother was angry.
Yeah.
And what do the breasts represent? Energetically, the breasts represent nourishment. And I was not nourishing myself.
Right.
Even when I started to eat better and take care of myself, I was burning the candle at both ends with my business, just living in survival mode and hustle, grind, because I couldn't release that inner belief that I was still the poor kid who, doesn't have fruits or vegetables, even though I go to Costco and don't budget for it. I just fill the cart full of as many fruits and vegetables as I want.
Yeah.
And I eat organic now. And everyone's like, oh, it's so expensive to eat organic.
And you don't feel bad about it. You don't feel that you don't deserve it any longer.
No, I'm like, of course I deserve to eat organic. Like this is my temple and I want to nourish it. Yeah. And I think that's so important for all of us because there's so many ways that we treat our bodies poorly when we don't believe we're worthy. And I truly believe that when we can align our spirit, when we can align our soul, when we can align our energy, whatever resonates with you, the body follows. Right. The body follows. And I can see that with my own journey. I have not counted macros or worked out or done any of those things I used to teach in 4 years. Yeah. And I started participating with my clients 4 weeks ago. So I took my measurements, I took my photos. I'm like, oh my goodness, except for the boobs, I am the exact same measurements that I was 4 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. I've just been maintaining because I'm loving myself more. I'm prioritizing me time. I mean, how many moms, when was the last time you took me time? Right. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to healing retreats in Sedona and Ireland. And my husband's like, okay, see you next week. Yeah. I deserve it.
You do.
I do. You do. I am a better mother. I am a better coach. Yeah. I am a better friend. I am a better sister. I am a better daughter. Yeah. I am definitely a better daughter when I take care of myself, mind, body, and spirit. Yeah. And when I put myself on the back burner, like I did for so many years, being the martyr, thinking, oh, I'll put the kids ahead of me. I'll put the house ahead of me. I'll put my husband ahead of me, the dog, everybody comes first. I was depleted. I was angry. I was screaming. I was repeating those same cycles that I grew up with that, when I look back, I've had to release a lot of guilt and shame for the way that I showed up for my children when they were young. Yeah. Because I was depleted. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I love it. There is something that you said yesterday. I hope you can remember it about when you healed the mother. Oh, yeah. I want to end this episode today with that statement. Yes. So if you've said all that you believe today, we were given to share, could you say that as a statement of encouragement as we close this episode today?
Absolutely. I can say this with conviction because I believe it with every ounce of my being. Right. When we heal the mother, we heal the home.
Amen. Mm-hmm. Thank you for being here today, Jennie.
Thank you. I'm grateful.